So up to this point we know how to create a function, import variable values for modification and not for modification, but we do not yet know how to get the result of a function out of the actual function call. Well, that can be done with the return statement. Let me show you an example. Now imagine that you have an if statement that is dependent on a calculation made on your customer's age. Statement could look something like this. Now if you wanted to create a function for this, there's really no need to pass a variable through as reference, since you do not need to modify it. You could bring it in with a global statement, but that would be somewhat of a waste of time, because you really only need to pass in the value of the variable into the function. But we still need to get the result of this operation. If we're going to replace this with the function. Now, because it's an if statement, we're looking for a true or false value. But to this point, we don't have an easy way to get the value out of that function. Well, using the return statement, we can create a function that does simply return a true or a false, in this case, or whatever value that you specify. When you use a return statement, another important thing to remember is that the return statement halts the execution at that point of that function. And you'll see why that's important in a little bit. So with this knowledge, we can now create a function for the operation, just like this. Okay, so you can see we're using the same operation in our function as was in the original if statement. But from the function we are returning a value of true or false, which happens to be what we need for an if statement. So what will happen is this function executes, and either true or false will be returned. If it's true, we're going to get this message, and if false is returned, we get that message there. This is, of course, a very simplistic example. So here's a more complex example from a website I developed using error checking. So you can see here that each statement is checking some sort of behavior from a form that the customer posted through. The first error that is triggered will trigger this return statement. So if it missed any of these, filling out any of these fields, then this will be returned, and the execution of that function will be halted. Again, very important, the execution of that function will be halted when this is returned. That means that these additional error checking statements will not be triggered. Returning values is very simple, but a very important part of functions. And you'll find that you use it on a regular basis. You can return values into other variables, into conditional statements, or even into other functions. One downfall of the return statement is that you cannot return more than one value out of a function. So keep that in mind. If you need to get multiple values out of a function, you need to consider referencing or using the global statement.